There are no virtues in the Shadowfell. Thanks to the Balhannoth, even hope is punished with death. Dungeons & Dragons, if you've ever heard of the Shadowfell, you know it is not a place to tread lightly. You do not simply walk into the Shadowfell. And there's every manner of creature there waiting to meet you with death. One of the most intimidating and legendary creatures in all of the Shadowfell is the Balhannoth, a bumbling mass of 6 tentacles and a large mouth full of jagged teeth. And today for Edition Encounters, we're going to be going over the 3rd, 4th, and 5th edition versions of this creature to see which edition did it best. A hulking creature with an ovoid body drops from the ceiling. It moves on 6 tentacles instead of legs. Between its shoulders protrudes a slavering mouth full of jagged, ripping teeth. The Balhannoth. This is 3rd edition's version of the Balhannoth. These things have a very interesting relationship with magic and magical abilities, and they are able to sense magic auras within 120 feet of them, knowing the strength and school of each one. Can pinpoint the location of any creature with ongoing spells cast on it, carrying magic items or otherwise using magic. Some of its physical abilities include Constrict and Improved Grab, doing more damage with grapples and allowing them to start a grapple as free actions. In addition, this grapple ability is very important because once a creature is grappled, all the magical properties of that opponent's magic items are suppressed. In addition, a creature grappled by a Balhannoth cannot cast spells or use spell-like or supernatural abilities. A Balhannoth automatically suppresses magic items by holding or wearing them. It also is extremely stealthy moving through the Underdark and has camouflage abilities. It has an ability called Dimensional Lock, which prevents any sort of magical escape and allows the creature to discern its surroundings. The only non-magical creatures a Balhannoth can sense are any that enter its Dimensional Lock radius. This thing is a mage's worst nightmare in D&D. And all of these abilities together really paint a picture of how 3rd edition wants you to use them. Hiding up on some ceiling in some cave or around some corner, it waits till you're within its very long reach, and it easily grapples you on its turn. And once you are grappled, if you rely on magic or magic items, you are essentially useless. I think the combat abilities of this creature are very interesting, and I'd like introducing some of these anti-magic elements and abilities more in D&D, so I'm going to give this creature a 7 out of 10 in combat. Now, moving on to some of its lore, we see why they have this affinity towards magic and why they snuff it out so well. They evolved to fill an unusual niche in the magic-permeated underground realm. They are attuned to magic and use its presence to detect their prey. Balhannoths feed on both flesh and magical auras. A magic item with a faint aura sustains a Balhannoth for a day. One with a moderate aura gives food for a week, and one with a strong aura is sufficient for a month. A legendary or item of very high power might even sustain one of these for life, though it actually does no permanent harm to an item. Eventually it tires of that magic's flavor and must seek out a new source of nourishment. So basically these things are trained to hunt and kill adventuring parties that have spent many levels grabbing magic items for this Balhannoth to kill them, steal them, and eventually get tired of them. And actually, funnily enough, a creature without any magic at all, unless you enter very close in its Dimensional Lock aura, the ability that prevents extra-dimensional travel. So they're essentially blind to everything but magic. The Monster Manual 4 goes through a lot of information about the Balhannoth, giving environment, physical characteristics, and their chaotic neutral alignment. In 3rd edition, Balhannoths can be found in any underground terrain, appearing frequently in the Underdark. And in Faerun, it is hypothesized that these creatures were created by Netherese wizards to assassinate their rival, though of course this only says it as speculation. So with all that being said about the Balhannoth in 3rd edition's lore, I give it a 7. I think it does a great job of describing its personality, flavor, environment, and tactics, but it really only gives one tiny hint at where they might come from. But the entire theme of the character of being able to hunt down magic and snuff it out, even sustaining itself off of magic, is really cool. And finally, we get to the art for these things. And it depicts a Balhannoth sneaking up on a group of drow. which even though we don't get a lot of detail about the entire body or what it looks like, I think it speaks a lot to these things' personality and hunting tactics. If you know anything about the Drow, they would not be easy to sneak up on in the Underdark. And these things, despite being massive creatures, can hide and camouflage themselves in caverns such as the one we see here. I also think it is terrifying looking with its large mouth and hundreds of teeth. Obviously, these things also don't have eyes because they are completely blind, but it looks like it does have some sort of gill-like thing where its eye should be, that maybe they're saying that detects the magic, but regardless, I think that this is really cool art and really demonstrates where they would be in the world. So I'm gonna give it another 7. 3 7s for a total of 21. And I think this is a really cool creature that they introduced in the 3rd edition, but I would like to see them expand on it more. Cunning subterranean hunter, the Balhannoth distorts nearby reality with its very presence. In 4th edition, the Balhannoth's abilities are cut down quite a bit. It does give it a sort of tentacle attack, where it can attack with multiple tentacles, and also just gives it more damage when it has advantage against a creature. It also has a bit of an odd ability, invisibility, which comes out of seemingly nowhere, where it can turn invisible until the end of its next turn. And then finally, it has reality shift, which initially I thought sounded like dimensional lock ability, but actually it can just teleport 10 squares. Enemies adjacent to the Balhannoth before it teleports are dazed until the end of its next turn, and then it gets advantage. And for 4th edition, that's it. I think compared to 3rd edition, this is bad. It is almost not unique at all. They gave it a small teleportation ability, as well as an invisibility that it can seemingly cast kind of randomly, kind of adding in its stealthiness and camouflage abilities, but using magic is not why it was so good at hiding in 3rd edition. It just had natural tendencies in its own environment to be able to hide. So I'm actually going to give this a 2 out of 10. I think the only redeeming factor that they added is that reality shift move. They didn't really get creative at all with the tentacles, and they really just took away things that were good about 3rd edition. Getting on to the tactics and lore, it says that the Balhannoth is opportunistic and waits for hours in ambush or stalks prey across many miles. Once it decides to attack, it can teleport in. For the lore, it says that Balhannoths don't make sounds or otherwise verbally communicate. They locate prey through some form of extrasensory perception. Well, in 3rd edition, we knew what that extrasensory perception was, but I guess here it is vague. A trained Balhannoth responds to spoken commands, but Balhannoths react most favorably to creatures that communicate using telepathy. They really stripped all the life out of this, which is not something that I think is very typical for 4th edition. It is a shell of its former self, keeping on to the stealth and underground aspect of this creature and a lot of the looks of it, but it no longer has any of this affinity towards magic or wanting to feed off of magic. So after getting rid of the most unique aspect of it, it is literally just an underground hunter that is good at what it does, admittedly, but it does nothing new or unique. So I'm gonna give the lore a 3. And finally, I know 4th edition will turn it all around with its beautiful art because it's never let me down before. And this thing looks like it came from Monsters Inc. It is a generic tentacle monster in my mind. It looks like a slug with thorns on its body and then tentacles that wrap around, 6 tentacles. It has none of the fear, none of the abilities expressed in 3rd edition, and even its lack of eyes and vision now don't make too much sense because they can track, because even though they still have blind sight of 10, it seems like they can stalk prey for many miles, so I don't know exactly how they accomplish that or how they explain it in this version. But yeah, it looks pretty much like a generic kind of horror monster, tentacle monster thing, like a big slug. And I don't really think that this is the best that I've ever seen from 4th edition. I might be being harsh, but I think that 4th edition usually has higher standards than this for art. Not that the art itself is executed poorly, but come on, use a little imagination. And for that, I'm giving this a 2. And after a 2, a 3, and a 2, we might have our lowest score in all of Edition Encounter for 4th edition, the reigning champion of Edition Encounters, giving it a 7. Well, while 5th edition usually twists everything 4th edition did around, I actually hope that it does it this time. So let's move on. Native to the Shadowfell, The vicious, predatory Balhannoth alters reality in its lair to make the place appear inviting to travelers. Once they step inside, the Balhannoth springs its trap. Alright, getting into the Balhannoth in 5th edition, it is a legendary creature, so it has all the legendary resistances and actions to go with it. We'll touch on regional effects for its lair, but since the other monsters didn't get it, we won't go too deep into it. But getting right into it, they have a multi-attack with bites and tentacles, and that is it for regular actions. Moving on to legendary action, it has a bite, a teleport, okay, so we did keep that from 4th edition, and a vanish, another thing we kept from 4th edition. It can teleport up to 60 feet away with any creatures it has grappled, and its vanish ability makes it invisible for up to 10 minutes, or until immediately after it makes an attack roll. So, a form of invisibility. For lair actions, it does have the ability to warp reality around it in an area up to 500 square feet, basically reshaping the terrain to assume the appearance of a location sought by one intelligent creature whose mind the Balhannoth has read. This creature can also target other creatures within 500 feet of it and teleport them within 60 feet. And finally, it can become invisible to one creature. We definitely embraced what 4th edition had, and for what it's worth, I think it improved a bit on what 4th edition had, redeeming itself with some of these lair actions. But in the end, it really just boils down to, again, tentacle, teleport, and vanish. Some of the lair actions are cool, like being able to read a creature's mind that's around its lair, and making the entrance look like something that the creature would want to go into in order to lure it into a trap. So all in all, I think a little bit better than 4th edition, and it at least embraces some of these new ideas, and I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10 for combat. Getting into some of the lore, it does have a few regional effects around its lair. Creatures within 1 mile of the Balhannoth's lair experience a sensation of being close to whatever they desire most. The sensation grows stronger the closer the creatures come to the Balhannoth's lair. It also can pick any humanoid within 1 mile and learn its innermost desires of a place, a safe location to rest, a temple, a home, or somewhere else. As for the lore, I already stated that it was native to the Shadowfell now, which does come in line a bit more with some of the things that they have added. It has some form of telepathy and can learn the desires of other creatures, but the Balhannoth never quite gets all the details right, and plenty of incongruities might give away the deception. The Balhannoth thrives on fear and despair, taking pleasure in the horror its victims experience. It terrorizes its prey by using its reality warping powers to mask its presence until it can snatch the target. Then it teleports away to feed on its victims. Drow also sometimes capture these Balhannoths and install them as guardians. It also states that their lairs are typically positioned around well-traveled roads and paths, snatching people who come along. And these things are obviously still scattered throughout the Underdark, even though they are native to the Shadowfell, as those two planes are connected in D&D, 5th edition at least. So how's the lore for these? Well, it gives no background. We still know nothing about its origins, except that it's now native to the Shadowfell, making those rumors in 3rd edition about the Netherese false, but it gives a little more context as to what they're doing here. Now they feed on despair and fear as opposed to magical energy, which I think it makes it less interesting for sure, because it feels like those creatures like that are a dime a dozen in the Shadowfell, but still fits very much with the flavor of the Shadowfell. So overall, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10 on lore. And finally, art. I do like this art, though it immediately makes me think of a barnacle from Half-Life. Things that hide on the ceilings, almost immobile, and it kind of backed that up with a little bit of the lore from the Drow, where it puts them in hallways where they assumedly don't move far from that. Other than that, though, I think this is probably one of the best tentacles. I don't think it's as generic, and they definitely look intimidating. Can't see any legs or any appendages that are holding it on the wall, so it is a little bit of a mystery about what these things actually look like. They also remind me a lot of ropers in D&D, and seem to have kind of just become those things. But overall, I think that this is at least pretty intimidating, and if I saw this in a dark cavern in the Shadowfell or the Underdark, it would definitely be terrifying as a player. These things now are designed to introduce a little bit more of horror, despair, fear into the players, as opposed to maybe something that they were originally intended for. Regardless, I think this is executed pretty well, and I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10, bringing the total for 5th edition up to a 14, making our winner and the best version of a Balhanoth in all of Dungeons & Dragons, the original. Sometimes you get it right the first time, so 3rd edition wins out. 3rd edition won in every category here, in my opinion, and I think the original conception of these monsters was something original, and it almost over time melded and meshed into a more generic Shadowfell or cavernous creature. Let me know what you think in the comments. Other than that, everyone, thanks so much for watching. Have a great one.